behind their best, and we just couldn't break them down. The truth is, they beat us up front. Can't wait to see Walmsley in a cash shirt, winky face.
Well, it's not maybe Walmsley that's going. It's maybe Thomas Burgess, isn't it? According to the strong rumours.
That's been dispelled, so we'll see about when that happens now.
Paul O'Brien, 1976, said great performance from Saints, good in both attack and defence. Tony was outstanding. Cass showing their other side when they're not getting their own way by playing dirty.
Do you think it's auto-corrected Roby into Tony?
Possibly, yeah. I wonder which Tony. It might have going Tony.
Scoots 28 Max, a great defence by Saints, laid a great platform for them to go forward. Really enjoyable match as a neutral.
And St David said best team performance by Saints since the 2014 Grand Final. Still lots of improvement possible. Plenty of drop ball, and Barber is available in 3 weeks. But with that defence, we have a chance. Tony and Thompson were machines. Roby and Thompson were machines. Yes, it really was. It was a really impressive performance from St Helens on both sides of the ball, wasn't it?
Well, mostly in defence.
Yeah, but I mean, they were clinical and they took their chances to finish. But the work, the team ethic in defence was what impressed me.
They certainly did. But then, when they didn't make errors, their middle, when the team didn't make errors, the middle forwards were able to get them up the field. Particularly the man Thompson that David mentions there. I think he's absolutely flying for the last month or so.
Yeah.
Possibly the form prop it forward in the competition. It could be argued he's been that good in the last month or so for the St Helens side. But yeah, when they did get up the other end of the field, they were able to pull some things out. Certainly, that Zeb Tyre try kind of turned everyone around, didn't it, in the Cass side?
Yeah.
I just think that it wasn't the attack was okay from Saints, and like you say, they were quite incisive when they had the opportunities. I just think it was more the defence that stood out. The right edge defence against the Cass left edge attack. We've not seen their plays bottled up so comfortably and so easily and so regularly. And even when they switched up the players that were playing out there in that position, when Smith came on for Richardson, for example, after Richardson had already stopped a try by closing down the space himself. It didn't change anything for that side. They worked so well moving across together. They did like what Brian said, giving away penalties. That's what we talked about in Series 1 and early Series 2 of SLP, when Saints were last really, really strong and resolute defensively and actually contenders.
Yeah.
This has stamped them back in as contenders by being able to defend that way that they defended back then when they took them to a title. And if their attack can take the opportunities that they don't waste going up the field, then yeah, certainly they're a threat and they're in the top 4 now.
Definitely. Castleford then, a blip or the genesis of some kind of wheel falling off style escapade?
Well, I think a couple of players are still trying to come back to fitness. Lauren Patrick had actually missed that he'd played earlier this season, so when I did the stats roundup last week, he wasn't included in the numbers like he should have been. But anyway, him and Matt Cook are still finding their way back from fitness, and Oliver Holmes has missed ages. So I don't think they had their most ready to influence a game bench that they've had this season. I think that's been a factor, because normally people like Senny Lefeo and Moores or Millington have all come off the bench in earlier games this season and turned it round after that sort of opening poor spell. Cass in this game tried to actually hit them hard up front and couldn't execute against a really good Saints defence when they were at their fittest, and then Saints were able to execute when they did manage to get a play up the other end. So I do think it's more a blip. I think they're building these players back into fitness and that sort of stuff in the forward pack. And I just think every attack's entitled to be slightly off the pace, and I'd more credit Saints' defence for reading those players and shutting them down. What I would criticise Castleford for is not switching up the tactics. It became apparent that there would be gaps down the middle for Castleford if they tried to put plays back on the inside when there was potentially overreading going on to cut down the fluid passing plays. I think there was gaps there that could have been exploited, and they never really were, other than like the Adam Milner try out a dummy half. They never really were exploited. So It was a comprehensive victory by St Helens' defence, and you've got to be impressed with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did the stats tell us then?
Cass made more metres by 104, they made fewer errors, 11 to 14, and gave away fewer penalties, 7 to 10. The stat that helped St Helens was defence, where despite making 70 more tackles as a team, they had a 3.3% better team tackle success rate.
Bloody hell. Okay, individually, who stood out for us?
Well, James Roby was the man of the match, and totally justifiably so. He was absolutely fantastic with 2 tries, 59 tackles, 12 mark tackles, 6 tackle loss, 107 metres. We haven't put his penalty numbers in there, but a couple of penalties that he gave were very the one or two he gave were very timely, shall we say, as well, at helping the defence get reset. Clever lad. Zeb Taylor, 1 try, 102 metres. Luke Thompson, 160 metres, outdoing Alex Walmsley, who still made 101 metres nonetheless. And John Wilkin, tackling machine this year, 49 tackles and 12 marker tackles.
Brilliant. And for the losing Castleford side?
Well, Joel Monaghan had a try, 101 metres, and 2 clean breaks for the old fella on the wing. Matt Cook came off the bench and did have some impact in terms of 107 metres. Jai Hitchcock has 7 tackle busts, 118 metres, 2 clean breaks, and 3 successful offloads. It's the fact that there's those high offloads figure and no try figure shows where it fell down a little bit, where it normally goes so well for Cass. And Zach Hardick, a 5 tackle busts, 107 metres.
Okay, so let's look at James Roby for a second, because he had a phenomenal performance in this game and also has been playing well. Certainly the back end of this, whilst he's been back in the squad and being used more under Justin Holbrook. If you were having to pick the England squad for tomorrow morning and you were going to send them out to play the opening game of the World Cup, who would you have starting at hooker?
Roby massively staked his claim on Thursday night. On Saturday morning, Josh Hodgson said, "Nah, mate, it's my shirt."
Right.
He genuinely did, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we do the NRL roundup.
Sure, that's it.
He's not been in the greatest of forms, Josh Hodgson, but he would get the shirt for me if he's going to be on an uptick.
Fair play.
Roby, as you know, is, in my opinion, the greatest player to have played in Super League in terms of his... I call him that because of his longevity of the standards he's set. You know, it's like, 10 years ago that he was Man of Steel.
Yeah.
And people said at the time he only played half a game or whatever, but he made massive influences on those games. And yes, he got the boost of coming off the back of Kieran Cunningham and having some of that great Saints side around him. But
he's carried it on whilst that side is disintegrated
he's
around
then become the main player.
Yeah.
The year that he missed most of the games was when Saints just really looked rudderless. Whenever he's been injured in patches since, Saints have really looked like there's no direction. Maybe with someone like Matty Smith they'll get some of that more than they've had in the past if he can play when they're not, you know, when Roby can't. But he's just the greatest player in the history of Super League, in my view, for that, in the same way that I would call Ryan Giggs the greatest player in the history of the Premier League, for example.
There you go.
So it's hard for me to not pick Roby all the time, but I do just think I'd go with Hodgson. And now it becomes Roby gets back in the conversation for the squad, whereas I've always favoured Darryl Clark as the extra one because of the dynamism he offers, the 10 metres per carry, the scattered markers and all of that. You might not necessarily get that as much at international level, but when you can, it'll be devastating and unexpected for people. But Roby and Hodgson can play the same game. Danny Houghton, tackling machine. I just don't see him influencing. I don't see him influencing positively in attack at the next level enough. I'm just making that judgment on having never seen him play there, obviously. But I do think it's got to be Hodgson, Roby in the squad for me as it stands.
Very good. Okay, to Friday evening then.
McShane. We didn't mention McShane. Sorry.
McShane's had a wonderful season, but he's not playing for him.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Huddersfield 36, Wakefield 6. Then down at the John Smiths in front of 5,429, refereed by one Mr. I'm going to go with Tom Grant. Could be Tim. Terry.
It's Tom
Grant, thank you. I'm doubting myself as there you go.
I think it's only his second or third Super League appointment, so we're on up and coming, and no one slagged him off.
There you go.
So that's good. Wakey White says, "I'm pissed off. We put in arguably the best season we've had in Super League, and then start the eighth with the worst performance in years. First off, we played some decent stuff, but dropped 3 high kicks and knocked on twice from dummy half. Experienced players doing it as well." Second half, we came out and had a go, but Huddersfield held firm and piled on the point once the game was gone. I'm so angry I could crush a can.
Crush a can. Brian Davies said, individual errors and poor execution of last tackle options cost Trin. 6 knock-ons in the first half meant we never built any pressure. Finn and Williams were poor and never posed any threat to Huddersfield. Once again, Trin showed they can't cope when they aren't the plucky underdogs. Trin's only hope is that Miller is back next week and that Randall isn't a duff Aussie, as Kyle Wood needs to spend less time on the field.
Yeah, as much as I've appreciated what Kyle Wood's done this year, he's not an 80-minute hooker.
No. So we don't heard anything from Huddersfield fans there, because they should be very, very pleased with this performance based on what we saw from Danny Brough, the number of players that he was involved in, the number of different try scorers we saw in the game. The brand of rugby league that Huddersfield are playing generally at the minute is very entertaining to watch.
You'll have to talk about those things, because I couldn't bring myself to watch Super League highlights after Friday night's game.
Oh, could you not? Okay. Well, no, I mean, they're try. I mean, look at the different try scorers. Brough, McIntosh, Ryan Hinchcliffe on the score, Cujo and McGilvray, as you might expect, Young Smith, and 6 goals from Danny Brough. Danny Brough was at the centre of everything that Huddersfield were doing. And the thing that I enjoyed most about catching the extended highlights of this one was just the kind of, I mean, even without Jake Mamo in the side, who's normally their player of the year, just this exciting brand of offloading dynamic rugby league that they seem to be bringing to the table now, that seems to be getting the better of teams more regularly, seems to not be leaking points as much, and now that they've got a more settled, less injury-riddled sort of side in the offing, they're getting some results. And I don't think they're getting a top 4 run, but they're certainly going to upset a few teams. And Wakefield, whilst they've been free-falling a little bit, probably would have hoped, would have had this one circled on the calendar as a potential win. And they were as impressive as I've been, as impressed as I've been with Huddersfield. They're pretty abject, really. Sam Williams' try was scrappy, to say the least. I don't know if you saw it, but
no, I didn't.
It came from a kick out of hand that almost got intercepted, that he then reclaimed and managed to just sort of bundle himself over the line with. So they weren't really doing anything tremendously exciting in attack. And I think it goes to show from some of the stats that you'll bring out later on that really there wasn't a lot of stuff. They weren't creating enough. And I think Huddersfield's forwards certainly won the battle to lay the platform as well, which Danny Brough then duly exploited. Yeah,
I mean, maybe Huddersfield, we credit the attacking play. They seem to certainly be putting up try of the week contenders every single week at the moment with team tries. So that's going great for them. And like you say, Rankin slipped in so nicely there, and they had Turner back, didn't they? So that back line looks complete, I think, with McGilvray, Cudjoe, Turner and McIntosh as the sort of 3/4 line. I think that's probably the complete part of that team now.
Yeah.
For Wakefield, though, seeing as their guys got in touch, I think it does what Brian's saying there, like maybe competition for some of the places at this stage is going to be key to finding some way to revitalise, because it's almost like the season's objective, season goal ticked off, and then that disappointment to end the sort of run to the top 4 with the being pipped by Salford when they should have really taken control of that. I just think maybe certain players' races run, certain players' years have kind of achieved what they set out to an extent. John Keir's been signed on for another year, though, hasn't he, as head of rugby, and hopefully they can sort of use this now to think about the future in the next year or two.
Well, this season has definitely been an improvement for Wakefield fans, so...
Yeah, but if it ends the way the 8s ended last year with no wins, then it could be a problem. And if they're going to play like this, and the stats will bear that out in a minute...
they could very well end it without any wins, couldn't they?
But it's interesting because I think they've got hope to come back in. And Huddersfield, I think we judge Huddersfield when they play a top 4 side, not a bottom 4 of the 8 side, maybe.
Yeah.
But if they keep winning all the games against the teams in that bottom half of the 8, so if they beat Wigan, Salford, then when they're judged against Castle Leeds, it's meaningful whether they can actually scrape in. But,
See how they do. Stats-wise, what did they tell us then?
Huddersfield won almost all the key numbers we look at. They had marginally worse average gain and conceded 2 more penalties than Trinity. But other than that, won. 298 more metres and 6-1 in breaks as well. That's 1.4% better team tackle success. The biggest stat margin probably came in errors, so 20 errors by Wakefield to 8 by the Giants. So that was Wakey